The alien princess hated humans, until one won her heart on the battlefield. The first human she ever killed was screaming when she put him down. Princess Vela of the Keth Dominion remembered it clearly. She had been 19 years old by the human calendar, barely through her first command cycle, and the man had been crawling through the mud of Sector 9 with a broken leg and a pistol that no longer had any charge left in it. He still pointed it at her. His hands shook. His face was dirty and wet and twisted with pain. He said something in that rough, flat language of theirs, and she did not know the words, but the tone was defiant. Not begging, defiant. She killed him cleanly, one shot, more mercy than her training required. Her second-in-command, a tall Keth officer named Dravos, had said afterward that humans were stubborn like infected bone. Painful, slow to deal with, and impossible to ignore until you cut them out entirely. She had agreed. She filed the report, noted the enemy casualty, and moved on. That was 6 years ago. Now she stood on the bridge of the warship Endless Gray and watched the battle unfold below her on the display screens with the grim focus of someone who had stopped being surprised by war a long time ago. The Keth fleet had pushed deep into human-controlled space. 3 border systems had already fallen. The campaign was going well by every measurable standard. Casualties were acceptable. Territory was being taken. The Dominion Council was pleased. Vela was not pleased. She was never pleased during campaigns. She was efficient. There was a difference. "Contact on the northern flank," said her tactical officer, a young Keth named Sorveth who wore his rank insignia too high on his collar because he thought it made him look more experienced. "Human frigate group moving to intercept our supply line." "How many?" "4 ships, light class. They are attempting a flanking pattern." She looked at the display. 4 small ships against her supply convoy, which had a defensive escort of 3 mid-class Keth vessels. The math was not good for the humans, not even close. "Let the escort handle it," she said. "Flag me if the tonnage ratio changes." Sorveth nodded. She turned away from the screen. What she did not expect was for the flag to come 40 minutes later with the words, "1 human ship remaining. It has destroyed 2 of our escort vessels and is requesting a communications channel." She turned back around slowly. "Requesting a channel," she repeated. "Yes, Commander Princess. The human vessel is damaged. It is venting atmosphere from 2 sections. Its weapons are at 30% capacity. It is, by all indicators, unable to continue fighting." Sorveth paused. "And yet it is not retreating." She stared at the display. 1 human frigate, crippled, leaking oxygen into the void of space, had somehow torn apart 2 of her escort ships. The 3rd Keth escort was still operational but clearly hanging back, waiting for orders. "Open the channel," she said. The screen shifted, static, then a human face appeared. He was younger than she expected, not a graybeard commander. He looked maybe late 20s, with short dark hair and a cut across his left cheekbone that was bleeding slowly, a thin red line against pale skin. His uniform was the standard gray-blue of the human navy, and the left shoulder of it was scorched black. Behind him, she could see sparks falling from a damaged panel and 2 crew members working frantically to stop a fire. He looked at her without flinching. "I'm Lieutenant Cole Navarro of the human frigate Ardent Lance," he said, in Keth standard, which surprised her. His accent was bad, but his vocabulary was correct. "I'd like to speak with whoever's in command." "You are speaking with her," Vela said in his language, which she spoke without an accent at all. "I am Commander Princess Vela of the Keth Dominion. Your ship is destroyed, Lieutenant. Your crew is dying. Request evacuation and I will guarantee safe treatment under the Dominion Accord." He was quiet for a moment. "With respect, Commander Princess," he said, "I'm going to need something from you first." She felt her secondary eyelids, thin membranes that Keth used to signal controlled irritation, flicker once. "You are in no position to negotiate." "I know that," he said, and something in the calm of his voice made her pause. He was not performing bravery. He was not doing the thing humans sometimes did where they shouted loud words to convince themselves they were not afraid. He was simply calm, as if the fire behind him and the venting hull and the 3 dead ships floating in the dark around him were simply circumstances he had already made peace with. I know exactly what position I'm in. What I'm asking isn't for me. My crew has 4 injured who can't be moved without medical equipment we don't have any more. I need your guarantee that your people will bring medical staff when they board, not after, when. Vela looked at him for a long time. You destroyed 2 of my vessels, she said. Yes. You killed 61 Keth soldiers. I know how many, I counted. He did not look away. I'm asking for medical staff for 4 injured humans. That's the request. She had been in war for 6 years. She had negotiated surrenders before. She had heard men and women beg, threaten, bargain, and lie. She had never, not once, heard a defeated enemy make a request that was only for others. She opened a secondary channel to the boarding team. Take medical personnel with you when you board, she said. Full kit, trauma response. She looked back at the screen. Your request is granted, Lieutenant Navarro. He nodded once, thank you. The channel closed. Sorvath turned to look at her with the kind of expression that said he had many thoughts and was choosing which one was least likely to get him demoted. That was unusual, he finally said. Noted in the report, she said, and turned back to the battle display. She did not think about the human lieutenant again, or she told herself she did not. But when the boarding report came in 3 hours later and she read that all 4 injured crew members had survived because medical personnel had reached them in time, she sat with that information for a moment longer than the situation required. She filed it away in the part of her mind where she kept things that did not fit any category she had been trained to recognize. She had a war to finish. There was no time for things that did not fit. But the face stayed with her, calm and bleeding, asking for nothing for himself. That was the first time she noticed that humans might be more complicated than she had been told. 3 weeks later, she was standing on captured human soil for the first time. The planet was called Meridian 4 by the humans. The Keth called it Acquisition 7 because Dominion administrators were not interested in what things had been called before they belonged to the Dominion. It was a mid-class colony world, mostly flat terrain in the southern continent where the humans had built their largest settlements, with thick forest regions in the north that the population had barely touched. The colony had surrendered after orbital pressure made resistance impractical. The civilian population was large, nearly 400,000 humans, and Dominion protocol required Vela to establish occupation authority and begin the transition to Keth administrative control. She did not enjoy occupation duty. She was a fleet commander, not a governor. But the Dominion Council had attached her name to this campaign, so the work was hers until a permanent administrative officer arrived. She had been working through the logistics of it for 2 days straight when her aide knocked on the frame of the mobile command room's door and said, "Commander Princess, the prisoner review." She had almost forgotten. Every captured enemy combatant had to be reviewed under the Dominion Accord before being classified. Medical status, rank, threat assessment. It was paperwork dressed up as protocol. She normally delegated it, but the aide explained that 2 of the review officers were sick and the backlog had grown and there were 43 prisoners waiting. "Bring me the files," she said. "I will review them here." She was on file 27 when she saw the name. Cole Navarro, Lieutenant, Human Navy, captured during boarding of frigate Ardent Lance following engagement in Sector 14. She stopped. The file said he had been held at the processing camp for 19 days. Medical status, stable, laceration to left cheekbone treated, minor burns on left arm. Behavior during detention, compliant, no incidents. Languages, English, Standard Keth, Partial Velhari. She read that last part again. Partial Velhari. Velhari was not a language humans studied. It was the old Keth ceremonial tongue, used in Dominion court proceedings and ancient ritual texts. She had never encountered a human who spoke even a word of it. She put down the other files. "Bring me prisoner 27, she said. Her aide gave her a look that she chose to ignore. He came in with his hands bound in front of him, which was standard for prisoner meetings, and a small healing scar on his left cheek where the cut had closed. He was taller than she remembered from the screen. Humans were shorter than Keth on average, but this one stood at a height that was nearly level with her own, which was uncommon. He looked at her. She saw the recognition move across his face, and then something she could not immediately name. Not fear, not hostility. "Commander Princess," he said. "Your file says you speak partial Velhari," she said. "Explain that." He seemed briefly surprised that this was the first thing she had said. "I study languages. I've been working through Velhari for about 8 months. I'm not fluent. I can read it better than I can speak it." "Why Velhari?" "Because nobody else studies it." He said it plainly. "I figured if I was ever going to be in a position like this one, knowing something unexpected might be useful." "A position like this one?" "Captured by the Keth, yes." She looked at him for a long moment. He did not fidget. He did not look around the room. He kept his eyes on her face with an attention that was not aggressive but was very direct, and she realized she had been doing the same thing to him. "You asked for medical staff for your crew," she said. "You sent them," he said. "I want to know why you were calm." He blinked. It was clearly not the question he had expected. Calm. "When you opened the channel, your ship was dying, 4 of your crew were critically injured. You were outnumbered and outgunned and alone, and you were calm. I have spoken to many defeated enemies. None of them were calm." He was quiet for a moment, and she could see him actually thinking about it, not performing thought but actually working through the question as though it deserved a real answer. "My crew was still alive," he said. "As long as they were still alive, there was still something worth doing. Panic doesn't help with that, so I didn't panic." He paused. "Also, I was terrified, if that matters. I just didn't see how showing it would accomplish anything." "You separated the fear from the action." "I tried to." She thought about this. "Your file says no incidents during detention," she said. 19 days, no incidents." "The food is bad," he said, but complaining about it seemed counterproductive. She felt something happen in her face. Not a smile, because she did not smile easily, but something near it, something that moved in the same direction. She controlled it. "Sit down, Lieutenant Navarro," she said. He sat. "I have 43 prisoner reviews to complete," she said. "Yours has taken longer than the others. You will be reclassified as a priority level hold pending further assessment, which means you will be moved to better quarters and given better food. Because of the Velhari. Because you are an unusual case. The Dominion does not often encounter humans who study our ceremonial languages." He looked at her steadily. "Is that really why?" She looked back at him just as steadily. "It is the official reason. It is sufficient." A pause. "Thank you," he said. "You say that often," she said. "I mean it when I say it." She dismissed him and went back to her files. She completed all 43 reviews. She did not look up from the desk until she was finished. She told herself the warmth in her chest was simply the efficient management of a complicated situation. She had been telling herself similar things for 26 days now. She was beginning to suspect she was not entirely right about that. The offensive on Meridian 4 was supposed to be finished. It was not finished. The northern forests, which Vela had categorized in her initial survey as lightly populated and of minimal strategic value, turned out to be something else entirely. What she had read as scattered civilian habitation was actually a network of resistance cells, each one small enough to avoid detection, linked together by a communication system that used bioluminescent plants as signal markers. which no Keth scanner had been calibrated to detect, because no Keth strategist had ever conceived that a species would use their own ecology as a military information network. The first ambush hit a Keth patrol unit on day 31 of the occupation. 6 soldiers, standard route, well armed. They were gone before the distress signal completed its transmission. The second ambush hit a supply convoy on day 33. The third hit a communications relay on day 35 and took it completely offline. Vela pulled her senior staff together at midnight of day 35 and stood at the head of the table with her arms crossed and the kind of quiet that made her officers very attentive. "We underestimated the northern population," she said. "I underestimated it. I am correcting that now. I want full satellite sweep of the forest regions by 0600. I want heat mapping. I want movement analysis. And I want to know why our scanners missed whatever communication system they are using." "The communication system," said Sorvath carefully, "is reportedly plant-based." The room was quiet. "Plant-based," Vela said. "The preliminary assessment suggests bioluminescent signal patterns, similar to a system documented in Keth historical records from our own early period of." "Who gave us this assessment?" Sorvath looked uncomfortable. It was a recommendation from priority-level hold prisoner Cole Navarro, Commander Princess. He requested an audience with the duty officer yesterday and provided the theory unprompted. She was very still for a moment. "He provided us a theory about the resistance network," she said. "Yes." "Voluntarily." "Yes." The room waited. "Why?" she said. Sorvath handed her a handwritten note, actual paper, which humans apparently still used in the absence of electronic devices. The handwriting was neat and angular. The note read, "The bioluminescent system is being used by the resistance, but the civilian population in the northern villages has nothing to do with it and cannot control it. If your forces sweep without this information, civilians will be targeted for the signal patterns in ways that will not actually disrupt the network. I would rather prevent unnecessary deaths than protect a military advantage. Navarro." Vela read it twice. She had been in war for 6 years. She had met enemies who were clever, and enemies who were brave, and enemies who were ruthless. She had never met an enemy who voluntarily handed over military intelligence to prevent collateral damage to their own civilians, in a situation where their own side had nothing left to gain from it. "The theory checks out?" she asked. "Our botanist confirmed it within the hour," Sorvath said. "The plants are a documented species with bioluminescent stress responses. Recalibrating the scanners to filter for the specific wavelength should make the network visible." "Do it," she said. She folded the note once and put it in the inner pocket of her uniform jacket. She wanted to see him that evening. He was in the priority-level quarters, which compared to the standard detention camp were only marginally better, but he had clearly made the most of them. The small shelf above his cot held 4 books, which he had apparently been given by one of the guards who had taken pity on him. He was sitting on the edge of the cot reading one of them, and he looked up when the door opened. He stood when he saw it was her. "Commander Princess." "Sit down," she said. He sat. She remained standing. She was aware this created a power dynamic, but she was not sure she wanted to sit. The room was small. Sitting would put them at almost equal eye level. She was not certain why that mattered to her. "The plant theory was correct," she said. "We have recalibrated. The network will be visible by morning." "Good," he said, not relieved, just settled. "You have given us an advantage," she said. "At significant cost to the resistance." "I know." "Why?" He looked at the book in his hands for a moment. "There are 312 civilian residents in the northern settlement clusters. Most of them are farmers and families. They didn't choose to have a resistance network routing signals through their fields. They are going to suffer whatever happens in those forests regardless of what I do or don't tell you." He looked up. "I can't stop the campaign, I can't change the outcome of this occupation. What I can do is give you the information that lets you avoid burning down villages to find signal trees." She looked at him for a long time. "You have very little to gain from cooperating with us," she said. "I'm not cooperating with you," he said, and his voice was careful but clear. "I'm protecting people who can't protect themselves. The fact that you benefit from the same action doesn't make it cooperation. It makes it a coincidence." "That is a very fine line." "It's the only line I have," he said, "so I hold it." She stood in the small room with him for another moment. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the camp, her soldiers on duty, the hum of equipment, the distant work of an ongoing occupation, all of it familiar, all of it hers. "The farmers in the northern settlements will not be targeted," she said. "I will put it in the operational order." He did not say thank you this time. He just nodded once like a person who had heard a promise and was choosing to believe it. She left. She issued the operational order that night. Her staff did not question it. She did not explain it. She went back to her own quarters and sat at the edge of her desk in the dark for 20 minutes before she admitted to herself that something had changed. She was not sure what it was yet. But it was there, quiet and persistent, like a frequency she had not known she was tuned to until someone had finally sent a signal on it. She had spent 6 years learning what humans were, stubborn like infected bone, difficult to ignore, impossible to deal with until you cut them out entirely. She was beginning to think that description was both accurate and completely wrong at the same time. That was a problem she did not have a solution for yet. But she was, for the first time in a long time, curious to find one. The resistance did not stop after the network was mapped. Vela had not expected it to. The kind of people who built a communication system out of bioluminescent plant signals did not give up because one system was discovered. They adapted. By the time her forces had finished the northern forest sweep and confirmed 12 resistance nodes, the movement had already shifted tactics, abandoning the plant network entirely and switching to something lower tech, human runners on foot moving between villages in patterns that changed daily. She almost admired it. The occupation stabilized in the lowland settlements, where cooperation was easier, and the civilian population had made a practical calculation about survival. But the northern resistance remained active for another 6 weeks, a slow, grinding friction that cost her Keth soldiers in 1s and 2s, and made the campaign feel unfinished in a way that irritated her every morning when she reviewed the overnight reports. She was reviewing one of those reports on day 63 when the commotion started outside. It was not a loud commotion. It was the specific kind of controlled urgency that trained soldiers used when something had gone wrong and they were trying to contain it before it became louder. She recognized the sound and was out of her chair before anyone knocked. Her aide met her at the door. "Resistance raid on the Eastern Supply Depot, Commander Princess. 2 Keth soldiers injured, 1 critically. The attackers are contained in the outer perimeter. 7 humans, 3 injured, 4 captured." She was already moving, the injured Keth soldier. "He will not survive without surgery. Our medical team is working, but they do not have the required equipment." "What equipment?" Her aide gave her the technical term, and she stopped walking. She knew that term. She had heard it before in a prisoner file, in a note about what was available at a detention facility and what was not. "Get me the human prisoner," she said. Her aide blinked. "Navarro." "Now." She was already at the medical tent when they brought him, still in his prisoner clothes, hands bound, guard on either side. He looked at the situation quickly and precisely, taking in the injured soldier on the table, the medical team around him, and the equipment laid out beside the bed. "He needs a Baron-type closure," Navarro said immediately. "Standard Keth surgical closure won't work on this injury type in this location." She stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I spent 2 years as a field medic before I went to officer training," he said. I've treated Keth injuries before, in the joint territory zones before all this. Let me help. You were a field medic. I was. I'm not anymore officially, but the knowledge doesn't go away. He looked at the injured Keth soldier, and his expression was the same one she had seen on the communication screen when his ship was dying. Calm and focused and entirely without performance. He has maybe 12 minutes before that injury is non-survivable. If you want to argue about whether to trust me, we can do that in 13 minutes. She looked at her medical officer. The medical officer looked at her. She cut Navarro's restraints herself. He was at the table before the cut ends had hit the ground. She watched him work. It was the only word for what it was, watching, because she could not look away. He moved with the kind of knowledge that lived in the hands and not just in the mind, quick and certain and quiet, asking for instruments by name in clear Keth without hesitating, and her medical team, after a moment of visible shock, began handing them to him without hesitation. 14 minutes later, the Keth soldier was stable. Navarro stepped back from the table and looked at his hands, which were covered in Keth blood, which was a darker color than human blood, almost gray-green, and he said nothing for a moment. He will need monitoring, he said to the medical officer, not to her. The closure will hold, but the tissue around it is stressed. Keep him still. No movement for 48 hours minimum. The medical officer nodded, looking at Navarro with an expression that was clearly working through several things at once. Vela took Navarro outside. They stood in the open air between the medical tent and the command building. The sky over Meridian 4 was pale orange in the late afternoon light, which was different from Keth's skies and always looked slightly wrong to her, but tonight it had a quality she could not name. "Why did you help?" she said. He looked at her, and the question seemed to land differently than the others had. She watched him decide how to answer. "Because he was dying," he said. "That's it, that's the whole reason. He is your enemy. He was a person on a table who was going to die without help." He paused. "I've been a prisoner here for 63 days. I haven't been mistreated. Your orders have been better than they needed to be. The farmers in the north are alive. I noticed all of that." She was very still. "I am your captor," she said. "I know that." He looked at her directly. "I know what you are. I know what I am. I know there is a war, and I know which side I'm on, and I know this occupation is wrong." He said it without anger, just as clearly as he said everything. "And I also know that the way a person behaves in a situation they didn't choose says something real about them. You've made choices in this occupation that you didn't have to make. I've seen them. You've been watching me. You've been giving me things worth watching." A pause. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm not trying to negotiate for better terms. I'm just telling you that I notice how people behave, and I've noticed how you behave, and it means something to me." The orange sky was moving toward dark. She stood with him in the cooling air and felt the thing she had been not naming for 63 days press against the walls she had built for it, steady and patient, like someone who had decided to wait for as long as it took. She was a princess of the Keth Dominion. She was a fleet commander. She was the daughter of a family that had served the Dominion for 7 generations. She was standing in a prison camp on a captured world with a human prisoner who had just saved the life of one of her soldiers. She said, "Come with me." He followed her to the command building. She dismissed her aide. She sat across from him at her desk, and this time she had chosen to sit, and he sat across from her, and the desk between them felt like a border that was being renegotiated in real time. She reached into her uniform jacket and placed the folded note on the desk between them, the one about the plants, the one she had been carrying for 32 days. He looked at it for a moment without touching it. "I've been carrying that," she said. "I know," he said softly. "I don't know what to do with it." He looked at her, and something in his face was gentle in a way that did not make her feel lessened by it, which was unusual, because gentleness directed at her usually felt like an assumption about weakness. "You don't have to do anything with it," he said. I didn't write it for any particular outcome. I just wrote it because it was true." "You do that often," she said. "Say true things without needing them to go anywhere. Seems more honest." She looked at him. He looked at her. "Tell me something about yourself," she said. "Not about the war, not about your service record, something true." He was quiet for a moment. "I grew up in a small town in the mountains," he said. "We had an old telescope in the backyard that my grandfather built himself. Nothing advanced, but on clear nights you could see the Keth border systems as pinpoints of light." He paused. "I used to look at them and think about what was out there. I never thought I'd be out here, definitely not like this." She thought about her own childhood, the Dominion Palace, the rigid protocol, the lessons on command and conquest that began before she could read. "I never chose war," she said, and was surprised to hear herself say it. He didn't look surprised. "Neither did I," he said. The orange outside the window had gone to deep purple. The first stars of Meridian 4's sky were coming out, strange stars in strange positions, not the ones she had grown up with. She did not move to dismiss him. He did not move to leave. They sat in the almost dark and talked for a long time, and not about the war, and not about what came next, and not about what any of it meant. Just two people, separated by species and circumstance and the enormous machinery of a conflict neither of them had started, finding something in common in the space between. She would not have a word for it for a long time. But that night was when it started, whatever it was. Clear and quiet, like a signal sent on a frequency she had not known she could receive. The campaign ended on day 91. Not because the Dominion won, though the official record would say they did. It ended because the resistance, which had never been defeated, reached a negotiated ceasefire with the occupation authority. The terms were considered acceptable by both parties, which meant neither side was entirely happy, which Vela had been told by an old Keth diplomat was the only reliable sign that a negotiation had been conducted honestly. She had written the terms herself. The northern farming settlements remained under the control of their own elected councils. The resistance fighters who surrendered were classified as civilians under the Dominion Accord rather than combatants, which legally protected them from punitive sentencing. The occupation administration was split between Keth and human liaison officers, which had no precedent in Dominion history, and which the council back home had debated loudly, at length, and finally approved because the alternative was a continued low-grade conflict that would cost more than the compromise. Sorvath had looked at the terms with the expression of someone doing very advanced mathematics in his head. "These are unusually generous," he had said. "They are workable," she said. "They are, Commander Princess." He paused carefully. The human prisoner, Navarro, he had input on the terms. "He is a trained officer with knowledge of human administrative structures and legal frameworks," she said. "Using available expertise is sound strategy." "Yes," Sorvath said. "That is clearly what it is." She did not dignify that with a response. The day before she was due to leave Meridian 4 and return to the fleet, she went to find Navarro. He had been given a formal status during the ceasefire negotiations. He was technically still a prisoner, but his classification had shifted to something the Dominion did not have a clean word for. A consulting detainee, Sorvath had called it, which was a legal category that did not previously exist, and which Vela had invented and submitted to the Dominion Council as an administrative necessity, and the Council had been too confused by it to object. She found him at the edge of the camp, standing at the perimeter fence looking out at the tree line of the northern forest. The afternoon light was the pale orange she had gotten used to over the past 3 months. He heard her coming and turned, and she saw him take in her full dress uniform, which she wore when leaving assignments, all the Dominion rank markers and the family insignia and the formal weight of everything she was. He looked at all of it. Then he looked at her face. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said. "Yes." "What happens to me?" She had spent 3 days working on the answer to this question. She had drafted 7 different versions of the order and filed the correct one that morning. "You are being reclassified as a liaison officer for the Human Keth Joint Administration on Meridian 4, she said. "Your rank is restored. You will be paid by both parties, which will cause significant accounting headaches for everyone involved. You are not a prisoner." He was quiet for a moment. "That is a remarkable amount of paperwork," he said. "It was," she agreed. "Why?" She looked at him. She had been asking herself the same question in different ways for 91 days, and she had found many answers, all of them true, none of them complete. "You told me something true without needing it to go anywhere," she said. "I decided I could do the same." She paused. "You are useful, you are honest. You prevented a great deal of unnecessary harm on this world. The administration needs people like you." She paused again. "I need people like you." The last part was harder to say than she had expected. He was looking at her with that attention of his, that direct and unhurried attention that saw things clearly and did not pretend otherwise. "That's the official reason," he said. "It is sufficient," she said. He smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile, a real one, not polite and not performed, something that started in his eyes before it reached his face. "For now," he said. "For now," she agreed. The orange light of Meridian 4's afternoon lay across the field between the camp and the forest. Somewhere in those trees, former resistance fighters were going home to their families under the terms she had negotiated. 312 farmers were safe in their northern villages. A Keth soldier was recovering in the medical tent, with a scar that would heal cleanly. She had come to this world to take it and hold it. She had done that. But the way she had held it, the choices she had made, the orders she had written, the nights she had sat in the command building talking with a human lieutenant about mountain towns and old telescopes, and the strange stars visible from a childhood backyard, those things had changed something in her that she could not change back, and she was not trying to. She had hated humans once, or she had told herself she did. She had filed the reports and followed the protocols and done the work of war with the same efficiency she brought to everything. She looked at Cole Navarro in the orange light. "I will be returning to this sector in 4 months," she said, "for the Joint Administration Review." "I know," he said. "I wrote that clause." She looked at him. "You wrote that clause," she said. 4-month review of the Joint Administration terms, page 7, subsection 4. He met her eyes. It seemed like a reasonable administrative timeline. She stood in the orange light on a world she had conquered, and he had somehow survived, and she felt something settle in her chest like a compass finding north for the first time, quiet and certain and completely unexpected. "It is a reasonable timeline," she said. "I thought so," he said. She left the next morning at first light, with her fleet around her and the pale orange sky above her, and the strange stars going out one by one as Meridian 4's sun came up. She watched the planet on the display screen as it shrank behind her, green and white and deeply, stubbornly alive. She had spent 6 years learning what humans were. She was beginning to think she had only just started. 4 months, she had 4 months. She sat back in the command chair of the endless gray and let the stars of open space come back into view around her. All of them the right ones, all of them familiar, and she thought about a small town in the mountains, and a telescope built by hand and a boy who used to look at the light from her world and wonder what was out there. She wondered if he had found his answer. She thought he might have. She thought she might have found hers too. The fleet moved forward into the dark, and for the first time in 6 years, she did not feel like she was only moving toward something. She felt like she was also moving back. And